Good morning, everybody. Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us for today's November 2018 Upgrade webinar. I'd like to especially thank our American counterparts because I know this is kind of a big day for you. So happy Thanksgiving to our friends down in the States, and we'll try to keep this as entertaining as quick as possible so that you can go back to your turkeys. Just a couple quick things before we get started. So as always, you can go back one slide for a sec there. Yeah. So as always, all of the upgrade release notes are on the wiki itself. So if there are any details that you like to read through in a little more detail, you can go to the wiki to go ahead and do that. There's the link. And then also just a quick PSA for a couple of our upcoming webinars. We are doing a Workflows Part 2 webinar on December 4th and 6th, and then we are doing a versioning webinar on the 11th and 13th of December. All of these events, as always, can be found on smartsimple.com/events. So if you're interested in attending any of those webinars, go to that particular link and sign up and register for that. I don't think there's anything else I wanted to talk about. By the way, this is Alex in the marketing department. I'm going to pass the presentation over to Sharon. Sharon is our technical learning specialist. She's been with SmartSimple for a good number of years now. She's particularly specializes in training for a lot of our clients as well as our internal staff. And so I think she's the perfect person to be taking you through the upgrade. So Sharon, take it away.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Alex. So some of you may know me already or have heard me over the phone, so I'm usually the one who is providing training or any updates on the system. But for today, for Thanksgiving, we have some upgrades for you. So this time around, we're going to be going through the global system upgrades first, and some of them are going to be really exciting. So what I'll be doing is toggling between our demo instance to demo a few of these options. And a lot of these, for any further information, you can always check our wiki, as Alex said. You can also reach out to either of us or ask questions during, so please feel free. But let's get started. So our major updates this particular upgrade period is our new notifications area. So similar to the way you would have in YouTube, you would have the option to subscribe, ring that bell. We also have that here. So as you can see on the demo instance now, we have a bell notification. We can view all notifications. So one we already have that's been broadcast today. However, you also have the option to create ones that are instance-wide for specific roles, and you as a system administrator now can create these on the fly. So for example, you've brought in a new feature, you want people to know about it, you can always go to your menu. And under the communication, you now have notification broadcast as a sysadmin. Open this up and you can create a new one. So this one I'm going to say announcement and hey there. And I can choose it to be instance-wide. I can set it to start at a specific time and date. So if I know I'm rolling this out next week, I can have this done in advance. Perfect. So I'm going to just set it for today and say now and end tomorrow. And I can then set it for specific roles if I wish. So whichever I've got here, I'm going to go with everyone. And then once I'm ready to go, I click activate. So saving that and reload my page. And I will then get my new notification over here. So simple as that. Really, really useful stuff, and definitely something worth thinking about if you bring in some new features, you want to draw people's attention to it. That's always a good way to go. So our next change is our improvements to our GuideStar integration. Tabbing back to our presentation. So, one sec. So if any of you are users on the line use GuideStar for charity check or anything else, GuideStar are retiring their current API in spring of 2019. So we wanted to get ahead of that and make sure that our integration utilizes their new API. So if you're using this, you may be affected. The upgrade will automatically convert your GuideStar search integration to instead begin using the new API. Functionally, there's no change. The connection will be updated from using a client-owned account and license instead to a SmartSimple built-in API. So you just need to update your integration version prior to spring 2019. So something to mark into your calendars before we all break for any holiday season. So the way we would do this, I'm just going to go back to our page here, is we would go to our global settings as a sysadmin again, and open it here, global settings, and navigate to integrations, or we can always type in integrations or GuideStar over here. And from here, we would, I'm just going to click this, GuideStar search, scroll down, this one here. And then from here, we can go GuideStar for grant applications and use the new GuideStar API. So very straightforward, just need to make sure that you do that prior to spring 2019. And for any kind of questions regarding billable nature of the feature, any costs, feel free to reach out to your account manager as well in the interim. There have also been some changes to our shared dashboards. So you may have noticed in our previous upgrade, if you were following that, that we enabled personal dashboards. So different ways to function your original look and feel. So if you want to, personalize your portal experience, this is where we would have our dashboards. So what we've done in this upgrade is we've decided to, try and share the joy, share the dashboards that we have. So from here, I'm going to just open up my dashboards. So under my name, I have my dashboards here. So I can create as many or as few of these as I wish. So I've created an upgrade one, very basic one. But at this point, I can either edit my layout, I can create new cards for this dashboard. So if you've been watching the previous ones, we can include list views, charts, aggregates, anything like that, or we can add to any aggregates we may have already. At this point as well, I can share with either specific users. So if I wanted to share my dashboards with Alex to show maybe what I'm working on at the moment, I can do that by typing in the name. Or alternatively, I can say, well, this one should actually be for all sysadmins and program managers. And I can say that. And then any of those who log in and go to their dashboards, they'll be able to see it as well. So really, really nice feature, especially if you don't necessarily want to make changes to the entire portal, you don't want to work with a draft portal. This can be a nice little quick fix as you go. So there's been a few other changes to the portal interface, the user interface in a few areas. So one that you may have noticed is that there is a way of making the header a bit more compact. We'll get into that in a little bit. But the one that is particularly useful is that if you have multiple user associations to organizations enabled, instead of seeing at the top switch account, you may have noticed if you're on backup that you have the option to change organization. So if you have multiple organizations enabled, it merely tells you which organization you are a member of, and you can just go to the drop-down and select the appropriate one. So that way, it just is a little bit less confusing in terms of our descriptions, gives you a bit more consistency and clarity as you navigate. So that's it for the major updates. We'll move on to the minor updates now. From here, we can see that there's a few really, really nice little minor updates, including updates to the portal shortcut display. So you may have noticed in my previous screen that the shortcuts now look a little bit different. We've got the privacy and security now as an icon. Just to make it a little bit more accessible, we can see changing the language, changing organization here, our menu, or as some of my clients have started calling it, the waffle, and notifications, and everything to do with your own personal settings. So instead of it being a drop-down, it's a little bit more intuitive, kind of similar to the G Suite kind of layout, and it's a little bit more clearly laid out. So that's a really, really nice feature about it. Just in general, we're trying to make sure that it's accessible as possible. We do try and keep to accessibility standards as we go. When we go to, this one is more for the configuration aficionados among us, but we have also brought in a simplified width setting for custom fields. So to demonstrate that, I'm actually going to go into one of our granting UTAs, corporate giving, and I'm going to go into our custom field settings. So as you're familiar, the gear wheel at the top, custom fields, grant, custom fields here. And if we were to open up one of our text box options and scroll down, we can see in our formatting, in our display, the width. Sorry, just one sec. So instead of it being, sorry, just one moment. I'm just picking a text box single line here, text box number. The formatting itself, we have full, large, medium, or small. We have our currency and US dollars, so pretty neat. And we also, again, have our usual options for instructions, placeholder text, and tooltips. We've made a few other changes to our custom fields as we go as well, but we'll just move away from that for a moment. We've also extended our reader log functionality to organizations and contacts. So you may have noticed in the past when you go into a grant, there is the option to turn on the reader log in the system features, particularly useful for sysadmins, or if you're interested in how long someone may be reviewing a particular grant. We've also extended that to the organization and contact level. So from here, if we go into an organization, we can actually view in the options, the reader log, it's something that we can enable or not, and same for contacts. And we've also enabled our advanced search builder so that our search is even stronger yet again. So advanced search obviously is a really good way of creating our basic dynamic filtering. It's kind of our reporting light. So definitely worth going into our advanced search and having a look at some of the options we have available. Of course, depending on where you are, it's always, it will give you connections to the different entities connected to it. So definitely something to check in the YouTube channel as well. There are some extra features on this as we go. And we have also added usernames for data exchange logs. So definitely worth having a look at any of those minor updates. Moving on to the next. So one thing you may have noticed if you do work with multiple languages is that we used to have multiple Spanish options, including Ecuadorian Spanish. We have since simplified that into one language, just so that it's a little bit simpler. We should have one that just works across the board. We have also added a select all option for file upload fields. So just briefly to show what that means, if we go back in here and I say, I pull up water, I can see this one here, clean water. If I open this and I have multiple files, I can actually select all of them here quite easily. So pretty neat. We also have a really nice feature, which is the enhanced playback of media with fixed position. So some of you may have been working with our media files going forward. However, we've enhanced that a little bit so we can see a video here, but we can also, if we scroll up, have this and move this around so we can keep reviewing the options even as we navigate through the rest of the application. So really, really useful, and strongly recommend having a look at some of those. When we go into our configuration mode, we can see how that can look as well. The next option we have, which is a very, very useful feature if you have a lot of detailed reviews back and forth, is the annotation mode has been enhanced to show previous commentary when you're putting in your reply. So just to show how that can look, if we go to our options and push this into annotation mode, yes, I want to move into that. And let's say I see that this has some responses on it. I can see that there's been a couple of responses, so I can reply again. And this time now I can see all of the previous commentary as I move. So I can say, this is fixed and save. Okay. So that means that in this case, then I don't have to re-go over my comments. Remember that for when I enter in my options. We've also updated the rich text hyperlink so that it automatically opens in a new window. So for any of you who do use rich text for any kind of instructions or anything like that, when you click it, it opens automatically in a new window. You don't have to include the target equals blank option as we go. So that's that for now. But just to move on to our on-demand system upgrades. So this is something that you can do yourself if you're a super user, or you can contact us if you would like us to enable them for you. So the major one that is a really, really interesting feature is our new Excel parser. So something that some of you may have been interested in thinking about for a while. What this does is it allows you to upload a document to a particular field if it follows a very specific format, and you can pull values from that into a field in the system. So we'll just briefly demonstrate how that works. So here, for example, I have the docket number here. That is, I'm just going to pop out of annotation mode for now. And what that is coming from is actually in the supporting documents, we have a file here. We just have a couple of configuration changes to make this work. So we open up configuration mode, we can open it up and see. So first thing is, it needs to be an upload multi-file storage. And we can see that there's some field mapping here. But before we do that, we need to just scroll down to the end and make sure that Enable Excel Parsing is set. So what this will do then is we need to go up to the field mapping up here, and we need to first provide the field name that it will be pushing the value into, so that docket number we saw. And then we also have to open the Excel itself and define the name of the cell that we are pulling the value from. So in this case, it's always useful to have something that's pre-formatted on your part so that they will always put the value into the same field. So it's pulling from the same reference. So in this one, of course, it is sheet 1, A1. If you're familiar with Excel, this is going to be extremely familiar to you. And then that will just automatically push the value of any uploaded document into that original field. Super useful. But moving on to our next feature. So you may be familiar with the email broadcast functionality. And of course, it's difficult to get the balance right with sending out emails, and some users may wish for the option to unsubscribe. So we do now have that with our email broadcast. We just go over to our email broadcast under communication. This is something you can enable, by the way. And we went into the newsletter here. You can enable an email tracker. You also have the option to provide an unsubscribe link. It's just something you toggle on. It will just add or remove a role. So usually with email broadcast, you can add a role that says, don't send emails to this person or not. Totally up to you. And we've also added some support for the granular permission options for the user and company associations. So what that means is if we go to our global settings over here, and we go into our associations, we now have more availability with our standard fields. We can also enable custom fields and roles. So we've really kind of beefed that up a little bit. So definitely worth investigating as you go. And moving on to our next slide. So a few minor updates as we go. So we have a new tile view for our list views. So when we go back to our list views here, and we open up our corporate giving. When we open up our list view now, you may notice two different buttons. So one is the list view that you're familiar with, and the second is a grid view. So when we open this up, we then get the business card type view that you may be familiar with, particularly if you are used to using the split screen functionality. This view may be something that might be useful to you. So that's a neat little feature. The next option that we have now is the compact header mode. So something I very briefly mentioned earlier. So you might be familiar with seeing an extra header at the top here, which may have your name, login details, security policies, everything like that. What we can do now is enable a compact header, which just combines everything in one. So just to show you how you can turn that on or off, let's go to our global settings. and this time we go to branding. And there's now just a simple toggle on and off, which is enable compact header. So I'm just going to toggle off to show what that looks like and save. And I just need to refresh my page to see my changes. So now we're back to the pre-upgrade look and feel, which if this is what you prefer, then fantastic. You can see some of these options. It's really down to how you choose to navigate or what you're comfortable with. But if you'd like to go back and turn it on, just as an action replay, let's go to our global settings, our branding, enable compact header, save, and now we're back to where we were. Okay, so really, really neat, just if you really want to start customizing your look and feel, if you want to kind of make it a bit more compact, a bit more streamlined, we're all about that. The next feature that we have, which is really nice, is anyone on the line who may be familiar with the batch update permissions is probably familiar with the fact that there are certain things that are easier to update and sometimes a little more complex, but we have updated that as well. So with our batch update, we'll just select these. We usually have the option to update field values, which looks at custom fields, but we have now expanded that to include standard fields as well. So there's a lot you can do with the batch update, of course, and as it's a very powerful field, always recommended to handle with care. And when we go to our custom batch update fields, we can use our buttons to update standard fields as well. The last feature for this slide is our enhanced web page view. So you may have worked with web page views where there's an option, you wish there was an option maybe to exclude certain fields from the print preview, the application preview, whichever you choose to describe it as. So I'm just going to this one, just having a moment, apologies. And we open our printable application here. The first thing you can actually do to preview your application is to select the different fields. So if you knew that there were certain fields yourself you wanted to exclude from the printable preview, you can define them here. And if we went into our configuration mode, just to show how that would be enabled, we can now see in the custom field IDs, we can extract field IDs, we can display the field names themselves, and we can show the field picker as well. So if we wanted to exclude or include any of these, we can do that here as well. So it's definitely something worth investigating as you go. You just also need to go down to the document options and make sure you have selected enable field selection for smart fields. So that's just a small two-part process there. Just make sure that's there before you can enable that field picker. I definitely recommend having a look at some of these features yourself in your own time. There's a lot that can be done to streamline. So tracking back to the next page, we've also added some support for track changes for record association changes. So in the past, when an association changed, there may not have been as much an audit trail around that. So we've now brought that in. So super useful feature. If we go to our associations in the global settings again, this is where we can enable track changes. If we go into one of these, you now have the track changes feature available to you. So very similar to when you're working on a universal tracking application, you have that track changes feature again. And for anyone who hasn't used it, this allows you to see the history of any field changes, but this is only available to system administrators. This will not be exposed to the applicant. Another feature which is really, really nice on the custom field level is we also have allowed for a minimum character and word count on text fields. So you may have seen the max word count, max character count, show the counter, but sometimes you need them to put in more than just maybe a full stop. So we have allowed for that as well. So just to show how that would look, we open our project summary here. And once we scroll down, we can see that there is a minimum and maximum length now. So very, very useful to keep in. So it just means that they do have to enter something of substance. And of course, you have the option to either count the characters or the words. So always good to know. And moving into our next feature, which is the enhanced invitations feature. So in the past, you may have looked at creating invitations to send out to different applicants, maybe for them to collaborate on a grant, something of that nature. But of course, at that point, it was just a case of send the invitation. If they don't respond, then they don't respond. So what we now have is the ability to bulk cancel and resend invitations. So if there are any potentially users who don't maybe check their email very frequently, you can work with that as well. So the way we would do that is going into our corporate giving here and just waiting for the settings. So under the invitation option here, let's go down to the invitation template. Opening this up, we now have the option to bulk cancel and resend. So a user can create an invitation, they can cancel it, they can resend the invitation once it's been created. Sorry, some minor construction there. So if we were to open one up here and had our invitations, so let's say that I've invited 5 people, no one showed up, I can just cancel them all and start again. Finally, just tracking out of here for a second, we also have added a record set. So, for example, if we have a session log that previously was only for our active users, however, if there's any kind of archived users, we have a record set to track that as well using Report Builder. So we're just going to give that a moment and let that go to Report Builder. Sorry, there's a little bit of construction happening outdoors, so apologies for that. All right. I think the browser decided to leave early for Thanksgiving, so apologies. And let's track into our reports. So here, for example, if I was to build a new one, archive, and save it, I can now go to my report builder, pick my record set, and that now allows me to see session log and session log for archived users. So even if I wanted to look at my archived users, but I wanted to maybe run a comparison on current users versus archived users, perhaps if I have a much higher uptake of the particular system we're using, you can use that for a comparison going forward. So really, really nice feature to look at, and definitely worth building reports of that nature or reaching out to us maybe if there's something that you specifically want to know. We're going to be looking at a lot more audit trails, particularly with the advent of greater privacy laws and protection, so that you, of course, have all the information you need at your fingertips. So that's it for the on-demand system upgrades. So there are also 9 extra updates to admin functions. So definitely worth looking into if you're an administrator, you want to just be very diligent about your work. It can always be helpful. So, but as for that, that's my upgrade webinar. So any questions, I'm happy to look at them now.
Yeah, Sharon, we actually do have a couple questions. Going all the way back to the notifications that we were talking about right at the beginning.
Cool.
Could we potentially use the notifications functionality in workflows to notify users of something instead of sending them an acknowledgement email?
You know, I don't think that functionality is in place yet, but that's a really good enhancement. Yeah.
And as a follow-up to that, also around notifications, can we disable or hide the notification button on the menu if we don't intend to use it?
I believe you can actually. You can also move to, sorry, just pardon me for a sec. With the notifications, when you build them, you can view all, you can also set them only for specific roles. So I think there could be a role you could add to say hide notifications. Mm-hmm. But as far as I'm aware, that's just something that's there for broadcasting purposes. So with this one, for example, you can define the roles here, but as to turning them on and off yourself, that currently is not there.
Got it. Okay. Any other questions? We'll give another 15 seconds and see if anybody else types a question into the chat box.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a reminder for everybody, this webinar is being recorded, so if there are any details that you missed, we'll be sending you a copy of the recording after the video has been processed, so you won't miss any of it and you can review the recording all over again. I don't see any other additional questions coming in, so I think what we'll do is we'll just break for here. If you do have any additional questions outside of this, of course, you can always reach out to our support staff. There's Sharon's contact details if you want to reach out to her as well. But otherwise, I want to thank everyone for joining us for today's webinar. And for those of us down in the States, happy Thanksgiving, and I hope you have a lovely holiday. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a great Thanksgiving to all the U.S. clients.
Bye-bye.
Bye.